All right, so I made a slide. I am like the worst person. I don't like slides very often or PowerPoints. I always preface it by that and then I do it anyways. So I don't know why I always preface it with that, but it's always the easiest way to get information out. And I could, if you're interested in getting a copy of this of the presentation, I mean the actual slides, please let me know because I could forward it to you. I don't mind. I'm not a hoarder when it comes to stuff like that. So let me share it with you. And so the whole point of the presentation is I hit a lot of roadblocks because I was one of the few English instructors. Oh, I should introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Amanda Trainum. I've been an adjunct in the English department since 2015, and I recently became a writing fellow for the School of Business as well as a freshman comp instructor for the English department. And so I was one of the few, I believe it was Emily and myself and Katie Stout, who also do online instruction. We were some of the only few who chose completely asynchronous classes, and I had never taught them before. And so I was kind of completely out of my element. I failed a lot the first couple weeks of the semester. But I learned a lot along the way too. My students were super accommodating and they kind of were my guinea pigs and they were very happy to be so. But through that, I found some really interesting ways to replicate or to, I say the word replace with a grain of salt, this idea of standard discussion board forum. And the reason is because I've been reading multiple articles and just getting feedback from my students. They seem to be really disengaged. I don't know how many of you guys had this same experience if you're using discussion threads where everyone posts right at the last minute, right before it's due. So they're not really getting the entire point of the discussion forums, which is supposed to be to replicate in-person conversation of some capacity or melding of minds. So with that being said, let me share my screen. Okay. So, okay. Okay. So asynchronous discussion board alternatives, this obviously can be used for synchronous classes or hybrid classes. This is just meaning the kinds of discussion boards we do where students are kind of left to their own devices or doing their own out by themselves. And essentially promoting dynamic student experience. So before I start really getting into it, I wanted to know, does anyone at all want to like share a positive, a negative, just the experience that you've had with discussion boards kind of this last semester since it seems that everything's come to a head?
Well, I would note I taught asynchronous. Been teaching asynchronous through the SUNY Learning Network going forward for over 20 years, just like John Kane. And we used asynchronous discussion boards for a long time. They've never been good. So the people who are new to it that are feeling bad, I've never really successfully gotten what I wanted to get out of an asynchronous discussion. And there was this ray of light in the fall called Packback that seemed to have a great improvement into what was happening. But of course, they took it away.
Well, I mean, why not, right?
Right. So, yeah. So I think it's very difficult.
Yeah, yeah. What is it you're looking for out of them?
You're looking for, I think, application. Someone has said Packback is still here. If you're teaching SUNY online, Packback is here. It's not being funded outside of that, I don't think. Right, John? You can, if I'm wrong.
We don't know, but it sounded like it was going to cost $25 a student if it's the only course they're using it for, and then $20 if it's the second one.
Oh, it'd be funded for hybrid. Great. Okay, so everyone but me gets to use Packback. But I think the big deal is you think they're going to apply and then they're going to talk to each other. Like, you know, these students would be like, repost that, and someone would say, oh, that's a good point, but have you thought about this or something like that? And that doesn't really happen, right? You set a minimum participation parameter and that's what you're going to get, right? And, you know, and so it's been, yeah, it's been something they have to do, often done at the last minute. And the idea is it should facilitate student to student and faculty to student engagement. And it just doesn't do it in the way that I've wanted it to do over the years. I've tried different formats, different prompts. It's nothing I've been truly happy with.
Yeah, and I feel like I think all of us have collective. I'm reading the comments also where Amy said that she tried doing reverse it. So do like the flip model where the students are the ones creating the questions and answering the questions and responding to the questions, which is a really great way to do it. I find that especially AQ, I did the AQ course. If you have done it or you have not done it, it kind of teaches best practices for teaching in general. And they kind of really promote this idea of a student-centered learning experience, which is what you're saying. And yeah, still not 100% happy. I find that using discussion boards just as they exist in their existence, is they don't do what we want them to do. Current doctors, I've been doing asynchronous for 2 years. I love them. I think every student has that same, and professor, it's not like it's just the student experience, but it's us too have the same kind of experience or the same kind of ideas or the problems when it comes to the discussion boards. And
I've
so,
noticed in
yes,
my,
please.
I've noticed in my course evals for the past couple of years, there's a question about, are they satisfied with their engagement with classmates asynchronously? And that's normally where I get like the lower scores, even though I do have the discussion board. So it seems like they want to have that engagement, but then it's like Liz said, it's like you have the, you know, the assignment and that's just not what we expected to get as the outcome. So it's hard because, you know, I see that they kind of want it, but it may be the way I'm doing it. I do like the discussion board where it's a case scenario. They do an initial post and then have to reply to one peer, and it's kind of dry, I guess. So that's kind of something I'm looking for, is kind of to boost that engagement.
Yeah, and I had that problem too. A lot of my students were just like, yeah, I agree, or that sounds good, or just something very, did you even read their did you even read their what they've posted? And again, I don't necessarily blame students because there's many, and we're going to talk about some positive and negatives, but one of the biggest, most daunting things, especially with freshman students, I work pretty much solely with freshman students, is that they already kind of feel really anxiety ridden when it comes to writing in general. So now they have to do writing kind of incessantly and across the board, so it becomes a chore more than anything else. I'm just keeping up with the chat, that's all. And I did think that students were a little bit more easier last semester to deal with it because they did have that understanding of each other, but this is going to be a whole new ball game once we get into this new semester where we're creating this. And I got the luxury of seeing it done because I had that asynchronous, you know, kind of just in general. My students did not know each other. A lot of them weren't even on campus. They were ones who opted to stay home. They weren't even present with us. But yeah, so just some positives. I'm not gonna, you know, read them point by point. One of the main reasons I hate PowerPoint so very much. But we all know kind of the positives are what we seek out when we're doing discussion boards. It's convenient, you know, they're usually very simple. It's not usually something exaggerative or a very hard platform to use. Students feel included. All voices can be heard, even people who don't, you know, necessarily speak up in person. It gives students a space to think about stuff, so they're not just kind of on the spot instantly. They can, you know, ponder things for a little bit. It takes us from being just strictly from being like the heads of the class to being facilitators. Students don't feel as though they can be judged as harshly because on like maybe appearance or outward, how they actually speak in class. There's so many positives that we kind of want with discussion boards. Unfortunately, even though there's less disadvantages, they kind of sometimes outshine the positives because they become glaring hindrances when we're trying to get discussion boards off the ground. So one big disadvantage is, as you have realized, it's very time consuming to read their posts because I don't know about you guys, I respond to my students, maybe not everyone, but you know, I always want to feel as though I'm including myself into their conversations as well. So I will, you know, respond to maybe a quarter of, if I have like 66 students, maybe like 20 of them or something like that. Some people respond to all of them, which is awesome, but you know how taxing that can be to respond to everyone's. They only focus on writing, which can limit other modalities. Some students are very poor writers, or even if they're not poor writers, they have very low confidence in their ability to be a good writer. And so that can put a roadblock instantly, not only in the discussion post, but maybe in your class if they feel it's too writing centric. Lose very necessary aspects of communication, such as my tone or the nonverbal cues that we use when we talk to one another. If there's anything that's a misunderstanding, we can't correct it instantly. In class, when there's something that maybe is getting out of hand or out of touch, we can kind of, oh, let's take it back a second. Let's like regroup and figure out what's gone wrong. Sometimes it sits there for hours until we've actually seen that there's an issue or a problem. And sometimes those can slip through the cracks. And so, I mean, I'm sure we could think of so many more as we've been talking. But so to flip it, instead of thinking about disadvantages, or I thought about the disadvantages of, or maybe I should have called it hindrances. That would have been better. Even though that we have such great intention for these discussion boards, sometimes our professorial intention doesn't really show to the student. They don't really understand how that works. And so we're gonna go right into it. John, I'm not sure if somebody already did a Flipgrid one. I know that I saw that somebody was talking about Flipgrid. I'm not sure if it happened yet.
It's happening Thursday. We've done some in the past, though.
I'm not going to go into like a lengthy detail because there is another presentation on Thursday about Flipgrid and how to do all the fine-tuned aspects of it. But I can pull it up if you would like me to show you what it looks like. So Flipgrid is this awesome video discussion board that I have dug out. A lot of people have dug out. It is a platform where students can create videos and respond to one another in videos. I was going to pull up mine from last semester, but I kind of didn't know how that worked with FERPA. I can if it doesn't. I'm not really sure what lines those straddle. But I could show you an example if you were interested, and it didn't kind of step on any toes if anyone's more familiar with that. So I can show you what it looks like if you would like me to. So this is the Flipgrid page. It's very, very simple. And I know people get really discouraged when somebody that seems like she knows a lot about technology and kind of newer to being a teacher that she says, oh, this is really simple. I promise. It's really like a 3-click sign up, So all you have to do is go sign up. It's free. And you can just go and I'm sorry. I have my 5-year-old. Okay, go, please. Thank you.
Mama.
And so it's a 3-click sign up. It's super, super simple. I've already signed up. Once you actually do, all you would do is like, I'm an educator, I'm logging in, and mine's already saved. So what you do is you create classes. And again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but you're going to create classes. And inside each class, this was mine from last semester, you can create discussion posts. And so inside each one, you give them directives on how you want them to answer the question, and they post it in video format. So they're actually speaking while they're answering the question. On the flip side, if you want them to respond to one another, they can do the same in response. And everything is super easy. Big, see how it says add a topic. If I clicked on it, again, these are my students from last semester, so I don't want to. But if you were to click on it, it says make a video now. It's literally gigantic buttons and gigantic words. So using it is a very simplistic format. I was just reading. There's an example in Flipgrid on the community group in Blackboard. I just kind of want to show you. And again, you can see it's a very easy interface. There's nothing crazy tech like ads popping up everywhere. It's very simple, very easy for your students to join. Let's say, if I go back to one of my new classes, because none of my students have posted in them yet. So this is what a class would look like. And it's so simple. Just to add a topic, you would just go right there. And then you'd put what you would like your topic to be, how long you would like them to discuss it for, and then any prompt that you have right here. It's really cool because the students don't need any additional software, as they only need a computer with a camera, or they can do it on their phone as well. So it's a wonderful platform. Yeah, Flipgrid app. Yep. So same thing. You can use your app. You can use your the computer. The formats are a little bit different, but other than that, not really much difference. All right, so some snags I encountered, because I know some of you probably already use Flipgrid, was that some students don't like to be recorded, and that is their want, and I don't ever require nor force my students to be on camera if they genuinely don't feel comfortable being on camera, as long as they're, engaging with the with the class, I'm pretty okay with that. But there are options for students who genuinely have that anxiety of being recorded. They can do graphics, they can hide their faces if they want to with like emojis. There are ways for them, or there's an option to just do an audio recording and not have their face on camera as well. I had a couple students who were like that last semester. So does it take longer to watch? I mean, it depends. I always set my parameters around like a minute. So it depends on how long you want their responses to be. I don't think it takes longer to watch or grade it. I feel that I also use video platforming for my grading when I grade essays. So I'm very much finding that when it's done digitally like this, that it goes faster for me. I mean, that could be just a personal speed thing. And when it comes to citing things, I haven't come across that yet, because I mostly have them just discuss kind of what we're talking about in class. Like I did dystopia and utopia for my last semester's focus. And so they just kind of had to talk about, you know, why they thought something was utopic or dystopic and so on and so forth. But there are, you can type in it as well as like comments. So if you were wanting them to cite something, you can always have them cite in the comments or orally. I've just never thought about that though. I don't know if anyone else has made them cite using Flipgrid, or if anybody else is using it. I would say this is another really big one that unless there's separate due dates for both the original post and the responses, a lot of students wait last minute to do the assignment. So one snag I encountered was that I made the video upload one due date and then responses another due date. It just made it so that everyone's response got at least the ability to be seen by more than one person. It also does a lot of cool things. Like it tracks how many people have viewed videos. It tells you how long, in what time frame students have engaged with the material. And that's right up on when you click on the question. It'll say 56 people have viewed this and it has been, you know, in process for 3.5 hours, which is nice because you can see how long people are actually spending on videos and doing that kind of stuff. Some positives that I found with this is that students are genuinely more engaged with Flipgrid. They just are, because it kind of mimics this ability to talk to one another, even though it's a kind of disjointed way of talking to one another. Also, there's not this kind of anxiety of, am I doing comments right? Am I writing something correctly? Because, you know, humans just speak better than we write, because speaking is a natural skill and writing maybe not so much a natural skill. Student participated more frequently in these than they did in my discussion boards. I had a class of 66. I combined all three of my 102s. And I saw a significant jump of students who would participate in my discussion board via Flipgrid than the ones that were just traditional typed out ones. And give students creative and positive outlooks for discussion, because they can do really weird or silly things such as use emojis. They have filters, you can put in sounds to it. It's very interesting. And the cool thing about it is you don't have to do anything for them to do that. They'll just kind of do that on their own, and you just hit play and you'll be able to see them all. So Flipgrid is wonderful. Again, they are going to show you, there's a whole workshop on Thursday about Flipgrid. So it's kind of one of those platforms where you just kind of jump feet first. And once you play around with it for a little bit, it becomes very easy to navigate and use. Another thing that I have thought about instead of discussion forum, let me go back to regular presenting mode, sorry, is instead of using standard ones, I have done blogs instead to take the place of standard discussion threads. I've allowed students to, there's so many ways, like one time I've done fairy tales, I've done, you know, social issues, so many across the board different things. But I feel that if you were to have your students blog instead of just, you know, do discussion forums, they become a little bit more interactive and they are definitely more engaged in the entries. The cool thing about blogs is that, again, it's not something that you would have to create yourself, and students are significantly more adept to these technological things than even me. I'm really not. I have to kind of go step by step with all my kind of blogs or any new tech that I'm trying out. But there are some free ones that are really good for beginners, and those are Wix, Blogger, and Weebly, I found are the really good ones. I've used Wix and Blogger before, and you can have any type of assignment. So say, for example, you want your students to respond to a news article that you have read. They can choose to respond with a picture, or they can choose to respond with, just a typed out blurb. Maybe they can respond with finding an article that contradicts it, or there's so many ways that you could present or have them post, and then require them to interact with each other's blogs, which again just makes it a little bit more dynamic and fun. Yeah, Blogger is part of the apps for our domain. Blogger is awesome. It's super easy to use. And the students will be able to go on there and go, oh, this person's doing one about, Black Lives Matter. I'm really interested in Black Lives Matter. So I would like to engage with their blog, and so on and so forth. I found that blogs are really interesting. I didn't include it in the slides. I also do something called interactive journaling, similar to discussion threads, but not necessarily. So my students have to share with me a Google Doc. And so they are required to, comment every X amount of times a week. And I respond back to them. And it kind of works as this back and forth momentum of me being able to kind of quasi-personalize their learning experience to make sure that they're understanding everything. You could do that in a larger capacity, such as 5 students are in kind of running on the same Google Doc. But yeah, any questions so far, or anything you'd like to add to it? Any comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
If you have 66 students who are doing blogs, how do you keep track of that in one central place?
I usually just, my students are usually broken up into 3. I just put them together for convenience. That would be something that would be just my separate grading book that I do. So every day that it's due, it's the one downside would be that it's not like a graded, it doesn't collate that way like it would for Google Classroom or for Blackboard. Another way that you can do it is if you're using Blackboard, which I know a lot of us are, or Classroom, you can make the discussion forums like a assignment, and then they would have to kind of post inside of there, even take screenshots. There's so many ways to kind of get around or navigate it. I found that I had to kind of go myself to their blogs, which could
That's
be
what I was wondering. So if you want them to comment on each other's blogs, how do they go about finding them?
Oh, no, that's just a URL. The URL will remain the same every single, no matter what you post on it, anything, it's always the same URL. I just collate all the URLs into one Google document that everyone has access to.
Ah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
No, not a problem. And I usually do something called a cooperative group, small cooperative groups, meaning being asynchronous is hard for students to kind of feel connected to one another, as we've been saying. And so with all my 66 students, I split them up into 11 groups of 6, and they're kind of like each other's support system for the class. So they have to meet with Zoom or on Google Meets, however they wish to meet, at least once a week to kind of discuss the things in the class. And so you can do it that way too. Just have a set amount or a set cohort of students engaging with one another, all depending on how big your class is and how you want to do it. You can always what is that, the poor tool in Blackboard? I'm not the best proficiency in Blackboard, to be honest. I use Google Classroom. So this is to sidestep from that. I also use a small group and videos. So I just started talking about the small groups that I use. So what I do, or what you can do, what I do is I assign students to random groups for every discussion, or I have them work in their cooperative groups, depending on what I want them to answer or what I want them to engage in. And so what I do is I require students to meet via Zoom or Google Meets, whichever is most convenient for them. I know if a whole group of people have iPhones, they can do what the heck is it called? Why can't I think of it? Where all the iPhones meet up. I can't think of the word.
FaceTime?
Thank you. Oh my goodness. FaceTime. time. It's kind of whatever platform they feel most comfortable in. And so they have to meet and discuss either a series of questions I populate, a series of questions they populate, and then I have them post the recording as their discussion forum. And I've done that a lot too. And students love that because they are talking to one another. And then other students get to see all the other conversations that are being had by other groups in my small cooperative groups. My fall 2020 students really like this. And again, because they had never met each other, it kind of gave them some semblance of, you know, being able to talk to one another, being able to be heard by one another. It's a really, really great tool for engagement that does the same thing as our discussion boards do. They just, they're not only written, you're watching them. And then for the next one, it kind of, you know, jumps on board the same one. You can use both Zoom or Google Meet. It depends on what you feel most comfortable with. I know Google Meet's easy because it's part of their, you know, their Google experience. But, you know, Zoom is something that we become very familiar with. The only problem is that I know a lot of students can't get the extended where they can host long sessions. I believe that's just a professorial thing. I've done things where I've hosted. Oh, sorry, John.
You can request it for the entire class from CTS, and
Oh, okay.
students could request it individually as well. And we
Oh,
do
nice.
have almost enough licenses for everybody on campus.
That is awesome to know because I was like hosting it for them. Like, okay, you guys want to meet at 6? I'll host it for you and record it for you and that kind of stuff. So the cool thing about Zoom and Google Meet is it has a record function right inside the platform. All they have to do is hit record and then they can just, and posting a Google Doc, a PDF, a Microsoft Word, a video and audio recording, they all are the same. You do it in the same way. You just take that file, whichever file and how it exists, and you attach it to whether it's Google Classroom or Blackboard. They both accept audio and video files to be submitted in any platform, which is really nice. So another way that I do it is I'll ask them to do the same thing. Hey, meet up in your groups and do a Zoom or a Google Meet. After they met, they have to post their discussions. And then what I ask them to do is I'll say, okay, now choose one other group's discussion and write a reflection. So now they're getting both visual and, you know, verbal explanations as well as the written component. So it kind of breaks up the monotony of always writing consistently all the time. But it also kind of gives them the ability to sit down and think about what other students are talking about. So not only do I just have them video, you know, you do a video, you respond in a video, I'll say, okay, write your answers and then respond in a video. And it kind of just, again, they have to be engaged because they have to be really making sure they're reading the prompts, that they are being proactive and understanding what's being required of them when it comes to how they have to produce their work. It takes a little getting used to once you start, you know, bringing in other modalities and, you know, other ways of presenting. But after a while, it starts to definitely, you even start becoming more engaged. I know that we have all taught the same material so often, and it's lovely. I think students have this really wonderful, they feel very safe behind their computer screen or their phone screen. So I think sometimes we get a lot more interesting responses via this mode than maybe sometimes in class where students feel a little bit more hesitant to speak up or explain themselves. So that is what I call dual modality responses. I just explained it in the last slide. This idea that you can have them record something and then respond to something in writing, or you can do reverse. You can have them answer a question in writing and then respond via some audio or video file. And it's just gives like a kind of step-by-step on how to do that. I think it creates a much more engaged situation for the students because again, they kind of have to be cognizant of what they're actually being asked to do all the time. And it takes away that monotony of just writing. Because to students, writing is busy work, especially writing like, I call these low risk assignments because many times we don't place high amount of their grade for each individual response. It's not a huge percentage of your grade. And so students kind of see this as this, oh, but I can miss a couple and my grade will still be okay. So I always try to make sure that I explain to my students why we use discussion forums and why we're, spinning it up and mixing it up and, doing all these different kinds of discussion forums. And they tend to be really responsive. And that's another AQ thing I learned, is that being transparent with your students will definitely be much better for them, because they'll understand kind of why something's important to the class, and which would make them kind of accept it or embrace it a little bit easier. I can't tell you how many times students say to me, when am I ever going to learn this? So making sure they understand that. Now, this one, I am insanely excited about this one. I know there's not many bullets, but insanely excited. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it. It's called Perusal. And I'm going to say it's kind of like a discussion board. I lopped it in here because I thought it could be used discussion board-esque. So what Perusal is it allows students to interact directly with material and one another all at the same time. So students can create conversation threads and then respond to each other's comments. They can upload pictures, videos, emojis, and they can personalize their responses. And it runs very similar to like a texting conversation. And I can show you that too. I was so excited when I found this. Let me just get it. It's another one of those really simple sign in, sign up things. If you are an educator or you are a student, this is completely free. So let me sign in with my Google account. And that's all it's going to ask you to do is sign in. And it's, again, another very easily constructed platform. This is my fake course that I created to show you guys. So it seems like there's a lot to it. Now, the cool thing about this is when you first start, it tours you through every little aspect of this website, which is super cool. So if I wanted to do settings, gradebook, student view, it shows you every small finesse thing about this. Oh, you have hypothesis, which is directly, oh, nice. See, yeah, I'm definitely going to learn Blackboard. Google Docs or Google Classroom is definitely my bread and butter, but OCC makes me use Google or Blackboard. So, and all of this is you can create assignments, and I found this to be insanely cool. Once you have this all set up and you're like, okay, I kind of know where my footing is, you can upload things to your library. This is your library. You can add any content. You can add web pages, documents, materials from another course, a video, a podcast. There's so many things you can add, and they populate on this side here. Once you get everything populated, and say you wanted to assign a discussion forum or a discussion thread to your students, you just go to assignments, and it's super simple. Just add assignment. It's going to ask you, what content do you want to add assignment about? You choose the content. Let's say I wanted to do mine about my commas and semicolons. And then it's going to ask you for your instructions. So this is the part where you could say, you have to at least make 4 annotations in this article and comment on at least 2 of your group's comments. And again, that's why I'm saying it replicates that awesome discussion board form. I'm not going to click next because I already have some, and I'm going to show you how it looks once the students have been engaged with another. Now, how it works before I get to that part, in settings, you're going to be able to choose how many students are in groups. And so it seems very convoluted, but it will take you step by step through all these small nuanced things. And I found that when I use it, I only use like maybe 3 or 4 of the tabs anyways. It allows you to make a scoring rubric so that this will grade how engaged your students are in the text and with each other, which I think is pretty interesting and pretty cool too. And you can set those parameters right here in the scoring section. It'll tell you what is considered good input versus bad input, or subpar input. But this is where the assignments would go. And let's say I was opening up this assignment. Oh, I can see that there is. Chat hates me on Zoom every time. Use the ladder for my own personal reading too. I found that too. I was looking at this and I go, oh, I can use this for if you want to get books and things of that nature too. So what I did here was I got a URL, any URL. And so here is where it says there was all these conversations. So here's the conversation I started with myself. This is not a real conversation. I just did this to replicate. So I highlighted this little spot here, and you can see how it will look to a student. So it kind of looks like this texting thread. So I said something like, eyewitness testimony is not considered reliable. That doesn't make any sense, you know, kind of something somebody else would say. And then in another account I made to kind of show this difference, somebody responded to that, and then, you know, I had them respond back. You can see what I mean. It kind of takes on this texting quality, or kind of looks like texting, which I think students would genuinely engage with really well, because this is what they're used to. This is the kind of platforms and forms they're used to, like, digitally engaging with. And I'm gonna have to look at the Blackboard one, because that is very interesting. I was so excited when I found this too. I was like, I'm so excited about this. And this doesn't just work for URLs or PDFs. It works for videos too. I had them do, this is all fake. Like a TED Talk video. I am not going to play it. So if it's okay, it's not. And so you can see here, if you open this up, that there are timestamps for, oh, I'm saying something as a student, and they can respond to each other in the timestamp. Again, very interesting. And once your assignment is due, it will send you a report on how engaged each student was with the assignment, which is really nice. Oh, I didn't know if you had something to say, Kate. I saw that.
Yeah, Amanda, I was just going to ask, thanks. How are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good, thanks. Good to see you.
You too.
Sort of. So I was wondering if you can set it so that they have to watch the movie or read, you know, you can't control whether they read the thing, but watch the video before they can comment. If you know.
I don't think there's a way to do that, but I think if you wanted them to read the article first, for example, posting that on your platform, so your Blackboard or posting it in your classroom is just the link or just the URL, and then setting this up as the actual assignment. And again, I'm sure the same thing will work in Blackboard's platform as well.
Hypothesis.
So I mean, that could be part of the directions. I don't know how well students genuinely listen to directions that we give them, especially asynchronously, but always can make that, read it, watch it once through before making a comment on it.
The other way to do that is using a thing called Edpuzzle that allows you to embed questions within a video. So like they have to watch the video up to the question and then they can't go further until they answer the question.
Oh, what is that called?
Oh, thank you. Try that.
Edpuzzle.
Hey, sorry, I'm just writing it down. Because yeah, see, I told you, I'm not the be all and end all of all this wonderful stuff. I'm just kind of figuring it all out, and I thought I had some really interesting stuff to share with everyone. So I always appreciate everyone's input and everyone's what they've discovered and what they found too. Play posit can be used to embed videos, questions in videos. Lynn asked, does it work for accessibility issues? If you go to the library, like say I went to like change blindness, it reads it. It can read it to you. So I don't know how, I haven't really finagled around with that, but if you click on something and you can say it can read aloud to you. So I think it can work really well with accessibility issues when it comes to maybe students who need screen readers or anything of that capacity. Is there anything like specific you're talking about when it comes to accessibility, or is that what you were looking for? I thought that was super interesting. I know that Google Docs does something very similar, will read aloud to you, but I thought that was a great selling point for this. I'm not sure if the one on Blackboard does that. Does anyone know if the one that's integrated into Blackboard also does where it reads it aloud? That I am not sure about, but I'm still kind of
It does support
messing around.
screen readers, but I don't think it has a reading aloud option built in, but it will work with screen reading software.
Okay, so like I could try to show you an example. I don't know if it's gonna work with the example because I don't know how much you guys can hear of it. Let's see. Don't think it's letting me. Was it people able to hear that?
You
A
have to
little bit.
enable share system
Oh.
sound with the screen share in order to be able to do that.
Every time. Enable. Oh, share computer sound? Okay. There we go.
Change blindness. Can you spot the difference? Mind gamers, put your attentional capacity to the test. Last modified on Wednesday, February 14th, 2018, 16.12 EST.
So, I mean, it does a pretty good job, and you can kind of highlight where you want it to start and where you want it to end when it comes to the screen reader. And that's right embedded. They don't need anything special. So if they were like on their phone and they were trying to do this, or they were maybe someplace where they don't necessarily have access all the time, it would do, it's right inside of this. And again, this is totally free for college professors or for teachers and for students. All right, go back to my, I hate having to move all your faces around trying to get everywhere. So I thought that was really interesting. I'm using it. I used it for a little bit of the tail end of my last semester, and I'm going to incorporate it from the beginning of my my next semester. To be perfectly honest, I just told my students that they're kind of my little guinea pigs in some respects, and if they're gonna show me some flexibility with me trying to learn everything, and I'll show them flexibility as they try to maneuver things, and so try to figure out what works the best for everyone. So if you still are really dead set on using standard discussion threads, there are ways to kind of use them in more productive or proactive ways. So one of the big ways is to make sure that you don't just ask students to respond to one another. I found that using more specific directives, such as asking them to reflect, to relate, to argue, to evaluate, to critique, to analyze, or to oppose, giving them very specific action words makes it a much more dynamic experience when it comes to the discussion forums. This prevents students from just saying, oh yeah, I agree, or no, I disagree. It kind of makes them explain themselves a little bit more. And I touched on this already, but really making sure your students understand why discussion boards are really important, especially for teaching asynchronously, because again, they don't have that buffer of being able to really build a really strong relationship with you or their other classmates in person. So just making sure they understand that this isn't just busy work, the reasons why we're using discussion boards, because it helps students understand and place value on discussion boards, especially if you're in a position like me. English 102, everyone has to take. So we get a lot of apathy sometimes because many students don't want to take English. We don't have very many English majors. So it helps them understand that there is a reason we're doing it, and just being very transparent and upfront with them. Give your assignments a little twist. For example, ask your students, instead of saying, respond in 200 words, ask them to post pictures, reflections of personal discussions with people they've spoken with, classmates, friends, families. Ask them to debate something, ask them to be analytical or analyze something. Much more engaged with that than just standard discussion threads, I found. I thought I had one more slide. Okay, so that's kind of everything in a nutshell. There's so much more that you can do when it comes to, discussion posts with your students. To be perfectly honest, the one I found that works the best is having them meet in small groups and record Zoom sessions. That's the one I found that is just, it works like gangbusters, to be honest, because again, they get this feeling that they are talking to one another. And as you guys have probably realized, students have been just thirsty and dying for connection with one another, since they can't be together very much. This isolation thing's been taking a toll on all of us. And so it gives them the semblance that, they can build relationships, even though they aren't getting that standard college experience that, everyone wants.
Hey, Amanda?
Yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to visualize the small groups, a Zoom. Would you assign them each their own? Like, would you set up separate Zoom sessions for each little group? And then would you have prompts that were available, like on a whiteboard or a screen? How would you manage all that, you think?
Well, how I did it was they had in Google Classroom, there's just a place for questions. I posted a question, and inside of it, one person in the group was responsible for uploading the video. I found it kind of monotonous to get a million entries on the same thing, because we can just manually insert a grade once that happens. And so everything they have to respond to would be inside the actual assignment. And then there's multiple ways I did it. I use small groups where they're kind of working together throughout the entire semester. And then other times I let them sign up to work with, maybe if they want to work with different people, or I've assigned them. I think it kind of depends on how the dynamics in your classroom are. It's really strange. I teach 3 of the same classes every semester, but there's always like maybe that one class where it's like pulling teeth to get students to engage, right? It's very interesting how that occurs. So I think it just really feel out your class. I would say, if you feel comfortable enough, starting with, hey, here's a sign up. I do a lot of Google Doc work where I say there's 5 slots for each group. Sign up for a slot. Or if you don't want to have that headache I would just say, assign it right at the beginning of the semester randomly. I just use random generators. And then if they start being a little iffy or not working out, then you can kind of do individual, these people had a kind of an issue and now they're not working well together. We can kind of switch it up a little bit as it goes. I haven't had that problem, but I do just a random generator, which you can find you can Google like random name generator, and it'll put it into groups for you.
Okay, thanks, Amanda.
Mm-hmm. And again, being able to record Zoom or Google Classroom or Google Meets, it's like a 2-button process, as we know, because we've used Zoom a lot. And then just make sure when you're directing your students, I always tell them to save it to their cloud. It's much easier and it comes up as a URL. They can save it to their computer, but it takes a little bit longer to upload when it's saved to your computer. But that's just more of a personal preference thing. To be honest, students are definitely more adept with this kind of stuff than a lot of us are. So asking them to record a session, they're like, oh, I know how to do that. Especially now that they've been learning digitally for the past almost whole year now. I feel like they're just pros at it. But yeah, so these are kind of things I've discovered, things that I kind of failed when I just did regular standard discussion threads. I didn't want my students to just walk out of there like this was dreadful. I hate discussion boards. So I tried to make it interesting as much as I can. My one advice would be just to don't be afraid to kind of fail at trying something new when it comes to discussion boards. Like I said, it could work wonderful for 1,000 classes, and in that 1,001 class, for some reason, it just all falls apart. Just again, being transparent with your students, saying, I'm learning this just as much as you are, so work with me and I'll work with you. But yeah.
Amanda, I have a question actually. I wonder, a question both for you and kind of for the group as a whole. I teach synchronously, I teach Zoom courses, and I'm wondering, this kind of like face-to-face interaction, recorded face-to-face interaction, I haven't done that really myself. I understand the ways in which it would clearly sort of facilitate a sense, especially of like intimacy and interpersonal exchange in an asynchronous course. I wonder what people would say about the effect of this in a Zoom course. I wonder if this heightens or lessens, or what the effect is really on face-to-face sessions, not face-to-face Zoom sessions, Zoom class meetings. Do you have any thoughts about that? Or I wonder if anybody does.
You mean like just synchronous sessions?
Yeah, I'm laughing just because Stephanie said I should have waited with that question for her 3 o'clock.
Well, I also did synchronous when I was at OCC, and I think you're talking about breakout rooms, right? Talking about using or just kind of the idea of people grouping. And I think I had a mixed result, to be honest. Some students are really engaged, but we get that in person too. Some students really want to talk and some students really don't want to talk. I just found overall, in comparison, it doesn't replace in-person conversation. I just want to make that as none of this ever will replace in-person conversation. There's this kind of comfort student feels when they've been in the same class with everyone and they kind of like been more out there, they're relaxing around them. But in terms of discussion forums, it's the best output I have gotten from students. But there is some, like, again, some students don't like to be recorded. I guess the biggest thing is just our ability to be flexible with students, kind of how comfortable they feel with technology. Because there's other things you can do. If your students don't want to do video, they can do like audio recordings of them having conversations. It's not necessary for them to have video. Would be nice, but I think it works really good. The only downside, I think, is that they don't get the luxury of kind of working with every single person all the time or seeing everyone all the time. It's kind of like microcosm of classrooms, and they're seeing like these little bubbles all the time. But it's hard in asynchronous. Any other questions? Any comments? Anything I didn't cover that somebody else found was a really good suggestion or idea for these? Stop sharing. Oh, I'll come to your session at 3, Stephanie. Don't worry. Oh, thank you so much. And again, if you guys want, I have a detailed instructions. I have videos and detailed instructions on how to create these, both for Flipgrid, which again, they are doing it on Thursday. So please engage and come and do that with them on Thursday. And perusal, just kind of how to set it up. Again, don't be scared just because the technology seems so much. Most of them, once you kind of get your feet wet, they're very easy to navigate. But that's all I have. If anybody has any questions and you don't want to say it now, you can always email me. I'll put my email right inside the chat box.
Okay, I'll stop the recording.